Hey everyone, Mr. Wineland here as we're going to go through expanding public education. Now we have to understand that public education at this point in time in the late 1800s into the early 1900s is a new idea. Um, a lot of times the education wasn't free. Education had to be paid for. It isn't until right around child labor laws are being made in the later 1800s that the idea of public education is brought up because these children needed to go somewhere. So that meant the government and some of these states investing into some of these schools. So we're going to talk about that. A lot of the individuals who supported this really felt like it was going to benefit everyone involved, especially the students. One of those was William Torrey Harris, an educational reformer who saw public schools as a way for education from 1889 to 1906 to promote certain great ideas from some great educators like Horace Mann and John Dewey. The idea was schools exist for the children, not just for the teachers. Teachers are important and teachers play a big role in this, but it's the students' education that we do what we do. I'm a teacher to help better my students, to make sure you guys and anyone listening, but my students are better off when they go out before they came in. So I'm trying to help improve their education. So Harris thought that preparing students for community training, outside life, things like employment, finding a job, having the skills for a job, and citizenship, which are important. Following the rules, following the laws, knowing those laws, and you can learn those in school. These were all things that are going to help not only better the person but better the society, because if you have someone who's following the laws, who's contributing and bringing some employment into society, that's going to bring more money into society and ultimately help bring make us a better place. So it was mostly for economic development, on scientific technology level, having that knowledge. Greater security, social status was very important to improve in those areas. Having a job, being stable, only was helpful. Others saw public schools as an opportunity to assimilate millions of immigrants. We talked a little bit about this in previous chapters. So definitely education could be used in many different ways. Although most states had established public schools by the Civil War, many school-age children did not receive any sort of formal schooling. So, I mean, it wasn't like quite a new idea, but it wasn't, not everybody had access to it. And it was still a slow thing that everybody needed to be in school. So the majority of students who went to school left within 4 years, and very few went to high school. So some barely got those basics, and then once they got those basics, they worked those jobs, those mines, in other fields in society. We see that the expansion of public school would happen between 1865 to 1895. Obviously, state laws being passed requiring school attendance for children of the ages of 8 to 14 for 12 to 16 weeks annually. The idea here was, again, to protect the children from having to go to work. So that was part of it. There was a curriculum emphasizing on reading, writing, arithmetic, which was helping the literacy rate at that time. Strict rules, physical punishment if you're not following the rules, emphasis on memorization, uneven quality of teachers. These things kind of ultimately drew some criticism, though, is even though the strict rules and the physical punishment were used to, in some ways, keep kids in line, that criticism was ultimately hurting their quality of education. Kindergartners, we see kindergarten is been established as well during this time, mostly for childcare for working moms. I mean, yes, you want to start education quickly. I mean, I know a lot of people don't take kindergarten seriously, but pre-K and kindergarten, it's really where you start to get kids acclimated to what school is and some of the basic rules and understanding how to play with others and follow rules and learn that. But that became a big part of surging public education with kindergarten from 200 in 1880 to 3,000 in 1900 with the guidance of William Torrey Harris. Public education in this era was one of growth. Opportunities differed sharply for white and black students. About 1880 had 62% of white children going to school, to that of 34% black children in elementary school. So not until 1940s are you going to see public education actually be available to the majority of black children living in the South. The North was a little bit better. There was a little bit better public education opportunities, but not that great. The industrial economy obviously put a big demand on education. Technical managerial skills were needed. This is where high school comes into play in promoting the need for high school. We see Andrew Carnegie, which we talked about, one of these high-powered moguls who made a bunch of money taking advantage of people. He actually, made a good point in saying that, look, in order for capitalism to succeed in society, it provided you needed ladders upon which the aspiring can rise. So basically, he was saying is, if you want capitalism to rise and be successful, you need to give people incentives. You need to show people like, hey, if I work hard, and I learn these certain skills, I can move my way up on the ladder. I can double my salary, or I can, find a way to make enough money to provide more for my family, or get a better job to do that. So this is kind of Andrew Carnegie kind of helping a little bit and trying to make the world a little bit better. In the 1900s, more than 500,000 students attended high school. Curriculum then expanded, includes courses in science, civics, social studies. So this is where it comes into play of teaching how to be a better citizen, learning what that looks like, what that it really is, what that means, to understand what's going on in your country. We see an expansion of education, American society, new vocational courses, helping male graduates understand certain industrial jobs, in drafting, carpentry, mechanics, then female graduates doing office work. So providing opportunities for jobs. We also see racial discrimination played a big part in education. Like I said, African Americans, not many attended school. They were excluded from public education, especially in the secondary education level. We see in 1800, fewer than 1% black teenagers actually went to high school. So in order to go to school, or to guarantee that, or to get that education, some had to go to private schools. So more than 2/3 of these students went to private schools, which received no government financial support. So families, African American families, had to actually pay for their kids to go to school in order to help better their child's chances in society, and possibly maybe getting into a college. In 1910, about 3% of African Americans between the ages of 15 and 19 attended high school, but the majority of these students still attended private schools. So private schools is the only way for African Americans to really attain education. And sadly, it's not going to be until we get into closer to 1940s that you start to see more these black kids and children get this education. And then it isn't until the 1950s that that you start to see that Brown versus Board of Education, that you see that that we get more equal opportunity for black students to get the same education. And then even civil rights, which we're going to talk later, the civil rights movement, to make sure that that education is secure. So tens of millions of immigrants also encouraged to go to school between 1860 in 1890. Many Jewish would be Americanized. I mean, this is where we talked about a little bit with the immigrants chapter, that a lot of these students, yes, they went for an education, but this was also the way for the government to use the schools to Americanize them. Now, is it wrong to lose someone's culture? Yeah, it is. Especially to try and force it. But to be fair, a lot of these kids also wanted to fit in and be accepted by many other peers. And so part of the Americanization was on the public school system, but it was also some of these children. By the end of the school year, we see that this is where the whole patriotic versus, this is where the whole you get the patriotic versus honor George Washington and Abraham Lincoln with plenty of enthusiasm. Basically, this is where the national, not the national anthem, but the Pledge of Allegiance is kind of pushed to kind of ingrade and put in kids' heads of like, oh, I need to respect and honor and really follow the ways of America. Some resented suppression of their native languages instead of in favor of English. We do see a lot of public school systems are actually pushing Protestant Bible beliefs into the schools. A lot of Catholic communities were very upset with this, sending their children to then Catholic education or Catholic schools because they felt like that the public schools were using the Protestant beliefs to try and make their children not follow the Catholic ways. Adults also attend night school, so it's not just children. Adults are getting access to night school. We see Henry Ford promoted this, having some of his workers, adults, to get better education to teach, especially the immigrants, workers. Basically, unfortunately with this promoted by Henry Ford, thinking that, hey, let's use night school to give them education, he also wanted to use night school and kind of was promoting his workers go to a night school where they would kind of learn to not confront management, and it wasn't just, hey, let's get you the education you need. It was also, hey, let's also teach you to not challenge authority and just do your job. But so this became a problem for unionists because they objected that these employer programs were actually weakening the union, teaching their workers to not actually challenge when there's something wrong with the management. So although the number of students attending high school had increased during the turn of the century, only minority Americans had only a minority of Americans had that diplomas. So we're seeing an increase of high school education, but some are dropping out and still going to get jobs. At the same time, we're seeing smaller minority only attend colleges and university, only about 2.3%. So not a lot are attending universities, a lot of access to universities. In 1880 to 1920, we're seeing college enrollment quadruple. So even though, yes, the numbers aren't quite there, there are a lot more still going to college than ever before. We see changes in the curriculum. And the curricula and the admission policies. We see industrial development is changing the nation's educational needs. We see more research universities emerge, offering a lot more modern languages and physical sciences, new disciplines of psychology, sociology, a lot more science, a lot more engineering, trying to teach other skills that would be needed for the outside world. Professional law, medical schools would be established around this time to get more lawyers out there, to get more doctors out there. Also, private schools and universities required entrance exams. We see that some state universities began to admit students by using high school diploma as the entrance requirement as well. But this is where we start to see like the ACT kind of, not officially get started here, but this is the beginning of trying to create exams that would exclude a certain group of individuals in society, whether it be minorities or poor whites, from attending college, because there we see that they were trying to draw labels of like, well, you're worthy of college because of this exam, but as for you, you're not. So let's have you go down this different track in life. After the Civil War, a lot of freed African Americans tried to pursue higher education. Despite their exclusion from white institutions, we see that they got help from the Freedmen's Bureau and other groups, founding certain universities like Howard out of Atlanta, Fisk universities, all in which opened between 1865 and 1868. Private donors could not, however, financially support or educate a significant amount of black college graduates to meet the needs of segregated communities. So it's going to take more time throughout the years to provide equal education, but we are seeing that black colleges are starting to come about, and ultimately, you're going to see some pretty well-known universities down in the South really try to make a name for themselves over time. In the 1900s, we see about 9 million African Americans. Only under 4,000 were actually in attendance at college or professional school. So you can see that a society that is now free, a group of people in society that are now free, are only limited in their ability to better their education, to better their opportunities in life. And so these 4,000 are going to be key in helping, trying to provide more opportunity for the ones to follow. We see that the prominent African American educator Booker T. Washington, his idea of how to advance African Americans forward was racism will end if blacks get labor skills, prove their economic value in society, feeling like that if they get jobs and they can show that they are worthy of learning new skills, that this will ultimately help build more opportunities for them and ultimately be able to grow their families and then grow their chances of getting their children into school. Washington, born enslaved, African American, graduated from Virginia Hampton's Institution in 1881. He headed the Tuskegee Normal and Industrial Institute, now called Tuskegee University in Alabama. The Tuskegee aimed to equip African Americans with teaching diplomas and useful skills in agriculture, domestic, and mechanical work. So his idea was to kind of eventually work our way to that point. Like, we'll get there, but we just need to prove our worth, our value, and eventually show that we are worthy of that opportunity. Whereas your dad, W.E.B. Du Bois, had a different attitude, who was actually the first African American to get a Harvard doctorate in 1895. He disagreed with Washington's point. In 1905, Du Bois actually founded the Niagara Movement, which basically insisted that blacks actually seek a liberal arts education so that the African American community would have well-educated leaders. So, in which, in some sense, that makes sense too. You want to show that African Americans do have the ability to learn and that they have a place in society and that they're capable of knowing all this material or learning. Du Bois proposed a group of educated blacks, the most talented tenth of the community, attempted to achieve immediate inclusion into mainstream American life. So basically, his idea is kind of take the top 10% of your community and make sure that they thrive in education and that they would continue to get better over time, and eventually that number will grow and grow and grow and grow. By the turn of the 20th century, millions of people received the education they needed to cope with the rapidly changing world. At the same time, however, racial discrimination was still a big part of our society, and we're going to talk a little bit about that coming up in the next section. But Du Bois and Washington, they had good ideas. I think Washington was like, hey, let's get people working now. Let's show what their value is, and then over time, things will change. Whereas Du Bois was like, no, let's go ahead and get the best of the best and eventually grow by getting it done. So both had good ideas, just, it ultimately it's going to take time and money and resources that unfortunately it took a long time to get, very long time to get for African Americans. All right, that's going to do it for section 2.